All right, so we will talk a little bit about this event, Christmas itself, and world over, people celebrate this festival, Christmas, on the 25th of December. But just to understand a little more as to what exactly happened on December 25th and what are some of the facts that we need to understand. And I prepared a few slides just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective uh, on this one. So let me just share my screen a little bit and let me know when you can see it. And I won't spend too much time on this, but are you able to see it?
Yes, brother.
All right. So the origin of Christmas. So before we go there, during the ancient time, when God destroyed the world with flood, at that point, how many people came out of the ark? It was just Noah and his family, right?
Yes.
Just 8 people came out of the ark. And after that, they multiplied on the earth. But after that, there was some event that took place. A lot of people came, but they wanted to build a tower, and a Tower of Babel, as we call it. And because they didn't want to disperse everywhere, they didn't want to scatter. So they said, let us build ourselves a tower. So we make a name for ourselves, that this is what we build. And so God was displeased with what they were doing. And so he came down and he confused their languages. Now, among the people who took lead in the construction of the Tower of Babel was one man called Nimrod. Right? He was the son of Cush, who came from the dynasty of Noah. And so he took a lead. And then when God confused the languages and everyone dispersed, at that point of time, there was no government actually. There was no, just no form of government. God was their head. That's it. And during the time of Noah and afterwards, it was just the father, it was just the patriarch of the family who told the family what to do. And there was no sort of a ministry or a government and department. All of that wasn't there. There was no king, nothing. Nimrod was the first person who, when he went out and when they dispersed everywhere, he gathered people and then he said, I am the king of this particular place called Babel. And that is how that became Babylon. And he was the first ruler. And he established such an evil rule in that time, and he established all kinds of evil practices inside that particular place called Babylon. That's why the name Babylon itself means confusion, corruption. And so Nimrod started all of that. And he did not want people, at that point, people forgot about God. They knew God, but God was not in their priorities anymore. And so they were completely, their knowledge of God had faded away. And their concept of worship and everything was gone. Now, what Nimrod did was he brought some alternate forms of worship, and he brought some alternate things to worship. And so Nimrod was the first person to introduce an alternate system of worship. And he said that at this point of time, you don't have to remember what God told you to do this, do good. You can worship anything that you want to imagine. And so you can imagine anything you want, whatever is in your imagination. If you imagine the sun, you make a image of it and start worshiping. You can make a wooden block of something that you imagine, and then you can, any form of God you want, you can create, and then you can start worshiping. The best part was it did not come with any strings attached. It did not come with any guidelines or rules or anything. You make your own rules. And so people were very happy with that kind of worship. And so that kind of worship continued for a long time. In fact, after that, we see the next account in Genesis we see is Abraham, right? So Abraham was the only one who worshiped the true God in his family. All the others, the Bible says, worshiped other gods. Who are these other gods? From where did they actually come? They came from this creation of this false religion by Nimrod. Of anything that you want. And at that point, people very famously, they worship the sun. because the sun, they believed, had a lot of energy, a lot of power. And they had good reason to believe, because the day and night was controlled by the sun, the seasons were controlled by the sun, the flowers blooming or fade, everything was controlled by the sun, the heat and the cold. So they thought that this sun is so powerful, so we will start worshiping the sun, right? And so he turned their attention to objects rather than the creator. And so that was the creation of gods, instead of worshiping one God. Turning their attention away from God to anything that you can imagine, and make that into an object and start worshiping it. And then what happened later on was, now we fast forward a little bit into the time of Jesus Christ. Okay, during the time of Jesus Christ, when he was born, who was ruling over the Jewish people? The Romans were ruling, right? And if you see the list of emperors that were there during the Roman time, I just have a very short list I created, but Augustus was the one, Caesar Augustus was the one who was mostly during the time of when the birth of Jesus Christ. And then Tiberius Caesar was there during the death of Jesus Christ. And you see here BCE and CE, right? Do you remember BC and AD? The time periods are divided into BC. What does BC mean?
Before Christ.
Before Christ. What does AD mean?
Anna Domini.
Anna Domini. Okay, very good. So Anna Domini means in the year of the Lord. BC means before Christ. So anybody who is looking at any time period would look at a time period before Jesus Christ, or that starts with in the year of the Lord, meaning starting with the birth of Jesus Christ. But after that, these people came, these atheists came that did not want to acknowledge Jesus Christ even in the time period, because every time you refer to a certain time period of a history, you have to mention BC and AD, and either one you are talking about Jesus Christ. And so they created this new system called CE and BCE. CE means common era, BCE means before common era. So basically they don't want to talk about God at all. That is the kind of opposition that it had in the modern era. And so now people are using the CE, BCE, but we know them as BC and AD. Anyway, so Augustus Caesar, all the Roman emperors took the title as Caesar, right? You know where the title came from, right? It came from Julius Caesar. If you have studied the book Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's play, in high school, you will understand Julius Caesar, who was a Roman general. He was a dictator, but he was very popular. He was not an emperor, but people liked him so much that they took his title. So Caesar Augustus, Tiberius Caesar, something like that. All of these emperors during this particular time after Jesus Christ died, this particular emperor, can you see this? Nero. Have you heard about this emperor, Nero? This emperor, Nero, was an extremely cruel emperor, because after the death of Jesus Christ, when the disciples, when they were preaching about Jesus Christ, a lot of people converted to Christianity from Jewish, from Gentiles, and they were first called Christians. And as the Christianity was spreading, these Romans did not like it at all. And more and more and more and more Christians were joining into the fold. And so much so that Tiberius and these guys did not care so much. But when it came to Nero, he started persecuting the Christians. He was blaming the Christians for everything that happened. If there was an earthquake, if there was a famine, everything Christians were blamed. And so Christians went through something called a period of persecution during the time of Nero. In fact, during the time of Nero, Paul was executed. Apostle Paul was executed. Nero only personally wanted Apostle Paul to be killed. And before Apostle Paul was killed also, there was a lot of persecution. After he was killed, it went even worse. And so Nero, in fact, set fire to Rome, especially the areas where Christians were living. And that is why we have the famous saying that Nero twiddled his thumbs when Rome was burning. Meaning when Rome was burning, he was simply sitting there, allowing it to burn, because he knew that Christians were the ones who were burning. And he blamed it on the Christians, that they started this fire. And so more persecution took place. Until at last, this particular ruler, Vespasian, he sent his general, Titus, in 70 AD, and they destroyed the temple of Jerusalem completely, just as Jesus Christ had predicted. Jesus Christ said, not one stone will remain on top of the other in this particular temple. And exactly like that, it was completely destroyed. They slew the priests and blood was flowing all around in that temple. So much persecution the Christians went through. But during the time of Nero, especially, there was so much persecution that they had these games. And for them, this was a sport. What was that? They had these people called the gladiators, right? They would go into so they would throw them into, they would crucify them, they would slay them, they would do all kinds of things. But they also had these games that they would gather thousands of people and they would love watching. First, it started as hunting of wild beasts. First, they would throw an elephant into the stadium or throw some fox or wild, and then somebody would throw a spear at it and then kill it. They would love watching killing of wild animals. But after that, they got such cruel thoughts that to the wild beasts, they wanted to throw people. And they chose Christians for that. And so they threw Christians into that completely unarmed and whatever. And then to the point where those wild beasts would literally tear them into pieces. And they enjoyed that. That was a sport. All day they would enjoy that sport, throwing them. And so, but as the Christian church was there, this was all, Satan's devices, hoping that the Christian church will die down. But the more the people were being persecuted and killed, more and more and more people joined the Christian church. It was actually increasing, and people did not understand what to do. For every 10 people that were killed, 100 people were joining the Christian church. And it was multiplying because they were so impressed with the sacrifice, because they would not give up their Christian faith. At those times, the Romans had all kinds of gods. They had the sun god. They had one god for moon god, love god, war god. For everything, they wanted to create gods. And so they like to worship not one god or the creator, but several gods. And for every god, they had a festival, because they loved living in festivity, all the time festival, all the time drinking and all that kind of revelry. That is what they liked. And so in order to do a festival, they needed an occasion. And so they created these occasions. Right? So very famous, they had a god called Mithra. And you will read of this in history. An Iranian Persian god, Mithra, who they call the god of the sun. And they, again, all of this, the Romans and the Greeks, they call it mythology, because it's all a myth. None of this is real, but they actually created all these things. And anybody who did not acknowledge them or did not participate in their worship, they would persecute them and kill them. If you did not worship to all those Roman deities or Roman gods. But Christians remained true. They refused to do that. Even to the point of death, they remained true and faithful to God. And so it was increasing and increasing. And Satan knew that if the same use of force was continued, that it would actually, the Christian church would multiply so much that, the whole point of suppressing it would not be accomplished. And so the second ploy that Satan accomplished was, I cannot do this by force. I have to do it in a different way. Right? And here comes the key. How is it that Satan used its sinister ways in bringing in corruption into the church? After all these Roman emperors were there, all of them were pagan worshippers. Pagan basically means that the non-Jewish, non-Christian worshippers, those days, they used that word called paganus. It's a Latin word, just basically means other people, people from a village or people from some other place, right? Just separate people. But these pagan people who did not believe in God or believing in the God, they believed other gods. Those people, the Roman emperors were all worshippers of those kind of gods, except that they had a lot of problem after going there. Their kingdoms were getting divided. More and more people were joining Christianity. So someone had to do something. Nothing was working. You can keep killing and slaying them, and nothing was really working for them. Until one emperor thought differently. And that emperor is Emperor Constantine. And this emperor ruled from 306 to 337 AD. And he really changed the course of history. What Emperor Constantine did was, he was a Roman emperor, but he said that there is no point in what we are doing right now. There is a need to unite these two groups, Christians and the pagans, right? And no matter what, they were not able to shake the faith of Christians in order to bring them into this kind of worship, pagan worship. So he said, let me try the other way. Let me see if the pagans can convert to Christianity. Well, why would the pagans convert to Christianity? He tried that and it did not go well. Then he thought there's only one way of doing it. If I myself convert to Christianity, then everybody will follow me. So nominally, just to bring peace and unity between these people, he did not really believe in Jesus Christ. He did not really convert truly from a heart, but simply for name's sake, he converted to Christianity. And he brought all the people with him and he said, all of you convert to Christianity. Now they converted to Christianity again for name's sake, but they did not want to let go of any of their festivals. They wanted to keep all their festivals. They wanted to still honor their gods, sun god, this god. And the Christians were not willing to do that. And so Constantine tried to work out a formula between the pagan worshippers and the Christians. And he said, we will all become Christians. We will all acknowledge Jesus Christ, but you must honor the dates in which these festivals were being held. And so these people were celebrating these festivals of their sun god, Mitra. They believed that Mitra was born in the end of December. And the gods and goddesses gave birth to the sun, Mitra, sun god, during that particular time. And so the end of the year was a big festival for them in December, right? And so the worship of Mitra started around December 17th. And they used to call it Saturnalia because they worshipped a god called Saturn, right? They were there's so much influence of these Roman gods on even modern day names that all the planets that we know, they're all Roman gods except Earth. Mercury is the Roman god of traveling. Venus is the Roman god for love, beauty. Mars is the Roman god for wars. Earth is the only English and sort of German name which means earth, ground. Jupiter, we all know, is a Roman god. Their god of gods is called Jupiter. Saturn is a Roman god, again, of agriculture. So every time they had a harvest, it was the god Saturn. Uranus is actually a different one. Uranus is a Greek god they're also god of gods. Neptune is a god of sea. Pluto is a god of underworld. So all are gods. Even the days of the week that we use. Sunday came after sun worship. Monday came after moon worship. Tuesday also, actually, before Tuesday, Wednesday, and all those things came, it was actually, Tuesday was called Mars. It was just the Anglo-Saxon people, when they converted it to, because I think they had a god called Tiu. And so they changed it from Roman gods to German gods. But basically, all of them are just some gods or the other. And so instead of Mars, they made it Tuesday. In fact, in Spanish, Tuesday is still called Martes. And Wednesday is the god of Uranus. And then Thursday is Jupiter, and they call it Jovis. And so all of these are Roman gods. Anyway, it's just history. But basically, I was just saying, because the influence of Roman gods exists even till today. We don't realize it, but it's all there. Anyway, so the what Emperor Constantine did was that, because the people worship these things, they said, we will recognize it as a different day if you want to celebrate it, but we need to celebrate it, right? That day is extremely important for us, that time. So December 17th was the Saturnalia. They used to celebrate that. And they used to celebrate it for 12 days. Have you heard about the song 12 Days of Christmas? On the first day of Christmas, second day of Christmas, it actually came from that 12 days they used to celebrate it. And that 12 days passes through 25th. If it started on 17, then it passes through 25th. And so they said, we have to worship this particular time. The Christians did not want to worship the sun god at that point of time. And so the Christians wanted an occasion. The pagans wanted the date. And so the Christians said, well, we have to celebrate something with regards to Jesus Christ. They knew the death of Jesus Christ was around the Passover time, so they already celebrated that. In Passover time, the only thing that was remaining was the birth of Jesus Christ. And so they said, we have to recognize the birth of Jesus Christ. And so the pagans and the Christians at that point of time, some people did not join hands with the pagans, but some Christians sort of lowered their standard. And they allowed these festivities to come into the Christian church. The pagans came, but they didn't come with a change of heart. They came with all their baggage. They came with all their thoughts, with their festivities, with everything that the idea they had. They simply changed their name to Christianity. And so they were very particular about that. Was their biggest festival. And so the Christians said, as long as you recognize the birth of Jesus Christ. And so they said, okay, we will call it the birth of Jesus, but we will celebrate it around the time that we normally celebrate the sun god, the birth of the sun god. And so they said, anyway, it is some birth. You believe in Jesus. We believe in the birth of sun god. It is some birth. And so we will join forces. We will call it the celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. The Christians seemed to be compromised and happy. And then the pagans were happy that it was around the same time. And so Constantine created a peace situation there. But they were celebrating it for a period of time. And so it was sometime in, I think it was sometime in the 320 something, that the Pope at that point of time, he said, okay, let us zero in on a date. And he said, let us recognize one particular date. We cannot do this for 12 days. We cannot do it for the whole season, because the birth has to happen on a certain day. And so he decided, let it be 25th of December, somewhere in the middle of entire celebration. And so the world started recognizing that as the birth of Jesus Christ. So when was Jesus actually born then? Was he really born on the December 25th? Well, so if you look into the Bible as to, he has to be born sometime. Was it December sometime? Was it October? Was it June, March? When was it? Well, the Bible does not give us a certain date for it. And when there is no particular date emphasized there, Jesus Christ, when he did not inspire anyone to write the exact date, it almost means that if it is not essential for your salvation, then it is not really there. And so what God is trying to tell us is don't focus so much on the date. Rather focus on the meaning of the birth of Jesus for you, right? But if you have to dig in a little bit and understand when could have the birth been, the Bible gives us no date, but the shepherds, we know that Luke points out that the shepherds were in the fields with their flock, right? So if you go to Israel, in Jerusalem in those days, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, in all those areas, you will never find in the winter time, December, the end of December is extremely cold there. You will never find an account of any shepherd taking his flock out in the night, but the shepherds were out in the night. So it wasn't December. If you see the history and how these shepherds operated, usually they operated between March and October. That is all. No later than October, they never took their flocks out. So the birth should have been sometime before October in that particular time frame. Is there any other indicator when is the birth of Jesus Christ? You know, the death of Jesus. When was the death of Jesus? We celebrate Good Friday, right? There is more evidence on the death of Jesus because it definitely happened during Passover time. Jesus Christ came to Jerusalem at the time of Passover, and shortly after that, he was crucified. And the Hebrews celebrated this Passover in the month of Nisan, they used to call it, and that was March time frame. And so we know that the death of Jesus took place around that time frame, around the time of March, early April. And so we know that Jesus Christ lived. How long did he live on this earth? He lived 33.5 years. That's it. That was the entire life of Jesus Christ. At 30 years of age, in 27 AD, he was baptized. Okay, and then after he was baptized, the book of Daniel gives us a little bit of prophecy. And the prophecy tells us that for 1 week, that means 7 years, 7 days, 1 day equals 1 year, the covenant was established, meaning that was the time where the people had a time to repent, the children of Israel. But in the middle of the week, there was an end to the sacrifice. The Messiah was cut off, which means after 3.5 years, Jesus Christ died. When he was 30, he was baptized. Exactly, his ministry was only 3.5 years. He entered into ministry, and then after 3.5 years, he died. So 3.5 years. That means that March comes at a 3.5 year point. That means his birth should have been 6 months, either this side or that side, because it's half year mark if it came to March. So whether you count 6 months up or 6 months down, you will still end up at September, October time frame. That is the second indicator that was the time frame that Jesus Christ was born. There was another indicator. A lot of people don't look at this, but the birth of John the Baptist. The Bible points us that Zechariah served, right? If you see the book of Chronicles, in the house of Levi, everybody was given a schedule, right? The priestly schedule was given. They had to serve. There were 24 priests, and everyone had to serve 2 weeks to finish the entire year, right? 1 week was given to one priest, and 1 week from the family of this, from the family of that. And Zechariah was from the order of Abijah. And so his order in that particular year, if you go to history, every year, each priest's order comes in a different time. In 2021, it comes in this week, that week. 2022, it comes 2 times. For every priestly house, it comes 2 times. And if you go there, Abijah's order, where Zechariah was serving, 2 times they had to serve, 2 weeks. Zechariah served 1 week, and some other person in the order of Abijah served another week. And so his one came June 13th to 19th. If you see that order, that came. Now the Bible tells us in Luke 1:24 and to 28, So it was as soon as the days of his service were completed, then he departed to his own house, talking about Zechariah. After those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived. When he came back from his service, and when he came back to his house, shortly after that, Elizabeth conceived. And she hid herself for how many months? 5 months she hid herself. And in the 6th month, angel Gabriel was sent by God to the city of Galilee named Nazareth. Right? So if for 5 months after June, let us assume that, it was exactly after June. He came on 19th, let's say in 10 days, she conceived at the beginning of July for 6 months. So that will take you to December, right? 6 months, 5 months. But in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel came. So end of November is done. And sometime in December, the angel Gabriel came and said that you will conceive a child. And shortly after that, Mary conceived. So if she conceived sometime in December, or let's say beginning of January, 9 months, if you count from there, then also you will end up in sometime in September. And so evidences point, if you look at it and if you really want to analyze and dig into it, evidences point that the birth should have been around September or October. Any which way you look at it. The introduction of December was purely by the pagans who came and they wanted sun worship at that point of time. And it was more so a compromise formula. You give us the date, we'll give you the occasion, and both of us will celebrate. That was how the December 25th time frame actually came.
They must be confused also.
Do you have any questions on this one? Is it making sense, or did I totally lose you?
Yes, brother.
Okay. At any point, if it's getting confusing or overwhelming, please let me know. Okay.
Okay.
So this particular one also has to do with winter solstice. Why they were so concerned about this is winter solstice. What is winter solstice? It is the shortest day of the year, right? We celebrate winter in December 21st. People were so happy that the shortest day is over, that they used to celebrate so much that now, in those olden days, they used to believe that the sun became weak. That is how winter has come. Sun has become so weak and sick. And so they used to celebrate after this particular day because they felt that the sun will regain its strength. And so they used to pray to this sun god. And so that particular time, winter solstice was a moment of celebration because the worst day is over. After that, now the day again starts getting longer. Like right now, right? Now, from now on, the day will start getting longer. In January, it becomes longer. In February, it becomes longer than that. So they wanted to celebrate the end of the worst. So that was one celebration. Sun worship during that time. And like I said, all these people believed that their gods gave birth to the sun because it was like a new beginning for the sun, right? The sun was born again. The old sun became sick and gone, and a new sun would come, right? That was their entire belief. And so they used to celebrate around the end of the year, right? And I just mentioned about this. And then they used to have this thing called Juvenalia, right? Around the time of this celebration. What do you mean by juvenile? Juvenile code, juvenile law, what does it mean? Juveniles are young people, right? Children. They had one celebration for children around this time. And during that time, they celebrated newborn children. It started with newborn children, but after that, they started celebrating with all the children. And they were so happy that they used to give gifts to all the children. And so the tradition of gifts came in, that they started giving gifts to kids. And during that time, all the trees would fade away. There would be no trees with leaves. And it used to look so gloomy, except the evergreen trees used to stay. They used to love those evergreen trees. And they used to be so happy with those evergreen trees that at least some greenery is there, that they used to bring at least some branches or a part of that tree and put it in the house. Or if they had it in their yard, they would go and decorate that tree, because that was the only tree that looked like it had life. All the other trees looked like it was lifeless. And so that is how the tradition of Christmas tree has come. Right? And like I was saying, in 356 AD, when Constantine converted to Christianity, he created this position called Bishop of Rome. And he created that in Rome. And he said, you will be the ones who will control Christianity, all the laws of Christianity and everything. And so that remained the seat of power of Christianity for a long time. And even now, but they did not want to call themselves Christians so much, but they wanted some name that included everyone. They said all are welcome, because pagans were joining at that point of time. So they wanted something that involved everyone. So they called it Roman Catholic. Catholic means universal. So let us call this, because we are based in Rome, let us call it Roman Catholic. And so they called their leader as Pope. But slowly what happened was that because the pagans had come into the church, and because they like to magnify objects rather than the creator, right? They created wooden blocks and all these things that they wanted to do. The same thing they were doing even to this particular person, Pope. They were treating him on par with God. And he rose to such a level that whatever he said was the law. And slowly the word of God was fading away. So much so that they replaced so many items. Because these people had brought in these worship of objects, they also started creating objects, relics inside the church. Right? It was just not their relics, but it was the relic of Jesus Christ, the relic of Mary and all those things, just so that those people will have some object to worship. And so he was the one, Pope Julius, in 356 AD, who chose the date, December 25th, that this should be the Christmas date. And so they, one last thing about this one. How did the word Christmas itself come? Right? The Catholic Church used Latin quite a bit. And so in their Latin, whenever they had a church service, the deacons would come and dismiss everyone and say, I think it's called Itni Mass. Itni Mass means go. You're dismissed. Right? Masset means dismissed. You can go at this point. Right? And so for some reason, all their church services took that Latin word called Mass. And they started calling their church services as Mass, which actually really means that go. That's it. But they said now it is not the word go, you are dismissed, but go, I'm sending you into the world, like how Jesus Christ said, go now and I'm sending you. So they now changed the interpretation to that particular thing. But even today, they still use the word Mass in their services. In the part of the Mass will be the word, part of the Mass will be the Eucharist, where, the communion, they call it the communion and all that kind. But they wanted this festival also to be one of their Mass. And so because it recognizes the birth of Jesus Christ, they wanted to call it the Christ Mass. And so they said, okay, let us still call it the Mass, but we'll say Christ Mass. And so it was called Christ Mass for a long period of time, till when the church did not follow or did not like the teachings of the Catholic Church, because it deviated so much away from the biblical standard that they did not even want to use the word Christ Mass anymore. And so they made a modification in that name and said, okay, instead of you using our word of Mass, we will change it to Christmas, so that it is more common, so that everybody can use it without any objection. Even till today, if someone says Christ Mass, most people will not want to call it that. And so they worked out a way in which, everybody can use that word. It's okay, you use the word Christmas, but the name origin is given by the Catholic Church. And even Santa Claus, right? Even the word Santa Claus, it comes from a person called Saint Nicholas, again, who lived during the time of Constantine, and a little later on he was but this guy was extremely kind and generous, and he would give so many gifts to kids and others, and he would save their lives from danger, and he really gave his entire life. He was called Nicholas, and the Catholic Church provided him sainthood later on. Catholic Church bestows these sainthoods, and after that they are called saint. And so they gave him that. His name was just Nicholas, but when they gave him sainthood, he started calling them Saint Nicholas. And in Dutch language, he was a Turkish guy, but in Dutch language, Saint Nicholas was Sinterklaas. That was a Dutch interpretation of that, Netherlands interpretation of that. And Sinterklaas slowly became Santa Claus, right? And that Santa Claus was not there. That tradition was not there till like 1800s, and because people wanted some way, and these businesses, the businesses started using that particular concept in order to attract people. And then that came into families, and it came into societies and all of that. So each of these things came from different places, but they brought it together at a time where, all of that can be put into festivities, right? And so that is really the origin of Christmas. And so what are we to take away from this one? Are we going to say that this is not the time, and it is actually September, October time frame according to the Bible, and so we are going to celebrate it at that point of time? That is not the point, because the date is not as important. If it was in the Bible. It would have been in the Bible, right? All we need to do is the true meaning of Christmas, about the birth of Jesus Christ. Let people understand the birth. As long as, it is not wrong to have a Christmas tree. It is not wrong to give gifts to children. It is not wrong to indulge in any of these. For example, to invite a family or a friend and host a meal for them during this time. None of those things are wrong, as long as all these things don't drown out the real meaning of what we are trying to recognize during this particular time. Because the undeniable fact is Jesus Christ was born, right? He was definitely born in one of these times, right? And so if we can tell the world that the birth of Jesus and the meaning of him, why he came into this world, to do the will of his Father, and when Jesus Christ came, what did he do? What is the meaning of his life and his death and his resurrection in our life? That is what we need to focus on. As long as we can do that, the world is recognizing this particular day. So it creates an opportunity for us to tell the world about Jesus Christ. So there is nothing wrong, right? But use this opportunity to tell the world when the world is receptive to hearing. Right? That's why they say, let Jesus be the reason for the season, because the reason for the season is so many other things for a lot of people, and it has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. As long as we can bring back the knowledge of Jesus Christ and his example on this earth, then we would have accomplished our purpose in celebrating this birth of Jesus. That is what I just wanted to share with you all today with regards to the origin of Christmas.
So much to take, but
was this confusing or too much to take, or any questions or anything on this?
No, it's so informative and very good to know all those things actually.
Right.
అంటే ఇంత like background usually చెప్పరు, like right, like it's all about Christmas celebration అంతా అయిపోతది, but this is something we wanted to share.
Nice అండి.
Yeah, so just history of actually how it came into existence, అసలు ఆ డేట్ ఏంటి అవన్నీ. Yeah, that's it.
The focus should be on the event, and the focus should be on the life of Jesus Christ. And if there is a possibility for you to share a Christmas message to somebody, it should be that we must develop a character like Jesus Christ. That is the whole focus, our development of character. Jesus Christ should be born. His character should take shape into your heart. That is the true meaning. If you want to give a message during this season, it is that. It is not so much about the date. It is not so much about the festivities that go around. All of that is a moment of happiness for us, which is all okay. But the true meaning will be realized when we strive to walk in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. That is when there will be a true meaning of this season. Okay?
Yes, brother. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And let me stop sharing at this point because,
Recording also, I think.
yes, and I will also stop the recording.